Welcome back, design students. In this video we're going to refine the lighting for our character, and we're also going to do a couple things to make the quality of the render look much better. But before we get started, I realized that I forgot to show you how to paint a belly patch on him. So let's go ahead and do that real quick. If you want to do this, I was going to paint sort of a patch right here of a different color on his stomach. And if you notice, we have here, if we turn off smoothing, that these three polygons sort of define where the belly patch might be. In other words, these three edges right here. If we go back to our Photoshop file and turn on the UV layers, we can find those right here. This is where the legs are, and these three edges here would be that belly patch right here. So I'm going to go to the markings layer that I have here, get my pink brush, and I'm going to paint that in. If I want that to come up into the neck a little bit, then I'm going to have to put it sort of right here. And I'm going to turn these off. Switch back to Maya and reload texture. And there you can see he has a nice little patch of pink on his stomach. It's also important that you save your Photoshop file, because you never know when you might want to come back and do something like what I just did. So to do that, of course, you go to File, Save As, and I always make sure that I put my Photoshop file in my project folder with my textures. So now that I'm done with that, I can close Photoshop. So to create better lighting here, I think what we're going to do is use a studio lighting setup. To start, I'm going to select my skybox that I have out here, my sky dome light, and I'm going to delete it. And then I'm going to switch to the side view. And what we're going to do is draw a shape here that's going to be sort of like a photographic backdrop. And to do that, we're going to use the curve tools. So come to Create. In the main menu, find Curve Tools and select CV Curve Tool. And then sort of use the grid as a guide and kind of draw like so. When you get down to here, just draw a couple of points down to the ground, like so. And what we've done here is we've created a curve. Now if we want to adjust the points on the curve, then we need to come and right click and select Control Points. And then we can grab any point on the curve and move it to maybe make the curve bigger or smaller or smoother or whatever we need to do. Okay, so once you have your curve worked out, switch to Object Mode and select it. And then we're going to switch to the top view, and we're going to move that curve over to the side, like so. And then I want you to hold down Shift and copy that curve over to the other side. So now we have two curves here. And what we're going to do is generate a piece of geometry between these two curves, and that process is called lofting. So to make a loft, we need to come to the Surfaces menu and select Loft. And that creates a piece of geometry between those two curves. If we switch to the perspective view, you can see what the result of that is. So because we're going to work on lighting, it might be useful to have the Arnold render window open here so we can watch the result of what we're doing. Before we put that open, I want to switch back to 4 views, and then we're going to open the Arnold render view. And I'm going to make it smaller. And then I'm going to dock it right here. So now it's part of my viewport system here. See, I got my 4 viewports and I've got Arnold here as well. Now Arnold is rendering this viewport. I'm going to click play, and you can see it's completely dark because there are no lights in the scene. So let's put our first Arnold Light in the scene. Let's switch to the top viewport, go to Arnold, and select Lights, Area Light. And that creates a light in the top viewport. And then in the side viewport, let's move that light up above our subject. Now if you look at this light, you will see that it has a line on it this way. That is the direction of the light at this point. And let's scale it up. The scale of these lights matters. And let's scale it out in this direction to make it roughly rectangular, and a little bit more in that direction. And we're not seeing any result of this light because we don't have much exposure. So let's make this like 10, and then you can see there is our rabbit, and the light is clearly coming from the top. If we zoom out, we can see what that render looks like. Now we don't want that much light, so let's tone this down maybe to like 6. And then let's put a couple of lights in the front. Let's just copy this light by selecting it and just shift dragging out a copy of it. And then we're going to rotate this light so that it faces the subject, and you can see that we're getting some light right now. And I'm going to move this light down. And then I'm going to move it over to one side in the top viewport, and then rotate it so that it faces the subject. And I'm going to increase the intensity of this light maybe to like 8. I think it would also be useful to work in object coordinates here, so I'm going to double click my move tool and switch to object coordinates. That'll make it easier to move these lights around. I'm going to move this light closer to my subject and up a little bit more. Now in studio lighting, this would be called the high key light. This creates the main look of the scene. So we're going to now fill in the shadows on the other side of the subject by creating what's called a fill light. So let's hold down Shift and copy this high key over to the other side. And then we're going to rotate this one to face the subject from the other side. And this one should be over to the other side, and it should fill in the shadows that are on the other side of the subject, and it should not be as bright as the other one. So let's knock that down a little bit. And let's frame our shot a little better. In the perspective viewport here, I'm going to turn on the resolution gate so we can see what we're actually rendering, and you can see why the resolution gate is important here. So let's frame this shot a little better. And we need one more light in this scene to complete a standard studio light setup. We need what's called a rim light. Now this light up above us, up above the subject, could be the rim light, but I think I want another one. So select the light that's above the subject and copy it over. And then we're going to move it down. And then we're going to rotate it to direct it towards the subject. And we need to rotate it in this view as well. Now this light should be coming from slightly behind the subject and above him. And it should also be rather bright. What we're trying to create with this light is a highlight around the back edge of the character that makes the character sort of stand out from the background. And I think we've achieved that right here. Might want to move this back just a little bit so that I don't see the edge of it here, and maybe increase its intensity a little bit more. And there you can clearly see the rim effect right here. So this is a standard studio light setup. We have our backdrop, we have our key light, our fill light, and our rim or backlight, and we also have an accent light overhead. And all of these lights work together to create a very flattering lighting on our subject, with soft shadows and nice rim lighting. In the next video, we're going to do some final adjustments in preparation for our final render. And I'll see you then.